Hello class, my name is Austin Holmes, and I'm really excited to be presenting on the cognitive approach to personality theories and how personal construct theory has influenced and contributed to that. And we'll be talking about some of the assumptions that this theory makes, and to better understand a lot of that, let's briefly discuss the person who has greatly influenced this approach to personality theories. George Kelly was born in 1905, and he earned his PhD in 1931. And he had a lot of different education in his life, but he took an interest in psychology, and he had a lot of clinical experience that greatly influenced the eventual theory that he produced, personal construct theory. And Kelly determined through his experience that his clients, the people that he saw, which were largely college students from the Midwest, were much the same as scientists or psychologists, in that a scientist or a psychologist will have a hypothesis or a theory that they then will test out, and the theory and hypothesis is either retained or rejected based on how the testing process goes. Now, through this understanding, Kelly developed personal construct theory. And the main claim of this theory was that the way which we perceive, the way that we understand, and a word that he often uses here is the way which we construe our world is directed by how we anticipate events based on our constructs. Now, when we talk about constructs, what are we talking about? This theory did not focus largely on the same things that a lot of other personality theories did or still do. It doesn't deal with unconsciousness or consciousness, ego. It doesn't deal with drives or stimulus. This theory is almost solely dependent and focused on the people's perception of events. Now, an example that we could use to create an analogy for this idea would be color-tinted glasses lenses. Kelly saw constructs, saw the way that we interact with our world in terms of the way we perceive things. And if you're wearing glasses with colored lenses, everything that you see will be colored in a certain way. And it's the same in this theory. Now, Kelly called the way that we perceive things, the way that we construe things, and then the way that we acted based on the way that we perceive these things, construct systems. And these systems helped us to anticipate or predict events or circumstances that would be coming in the future. And in this way, we would better understand our world. See, a construct is really a subjective interpretation of our world or our reality, and it's based on the measurement of our daily life using those personal theories, using those hypotheses, and measuring them against our reality. Now, the results of those tests, the results of weighing those hypotheses, will affect the way that we build our construct system, will affect the way that we operate, because our understanding of the world will be shaped by the way we perceive, by the way that we uncover what is going on in the world. Now, this whole process requires a large amount of fluidity in the case that one of our hypotheses or theories is disproven. You see, if you think something is going to go one way and then it doesn't, then, of course, you need to be able to respond to that. And this idea is called constructive alternativism. And this idea is essentially that if your theory doesn't work out, then you need an alternative to rely on. Because these constructs, these ways of operating in our world, these systems, are only as valuable as they allow us to predict the future. They're only as valuable as their predictive accuracy. Can we actually anticipate effectively what's coming in the future? Can we effectively understand our world well using these constructs? If we can't, then they're not valuable to us, and they have to be replaced. And that's why we need fluidity. Now, there are 11 corollaries in this theory, that are extremely valuable to understanding how this theory contributed and how it works, and even for uncovering some of the assumptions that Kelly had in this theory. The first of these is construction. And essentially, this corollary refers to how we predict or anticipate experiences that are similar to ones that we already have in the future. So, for example, if you have an experience, let's say you go to the beach and you play in the water, and it's great. It was a great day. And then you have another experience. You go to a river. It also has maybe some sand. All of the similarities between those two different events will allow you to predict and anticipate what that experience, that new one, being at the river instead of the other beach, will be like. That's what construction is. The next corollary is individuality, and essentially what we're talking about here is how different people construe different events differently. And that really makes it's really easy to understand when you think about the analogy of the glasses. Everyone's wearing a different pair of glasses, right? So everyone's going to see different things differently. You could see the same event, and two people could perceive, could construe that differently. The next corollary is organization. And what we're talking about here is how we form patterns according to the way we perceive similarities in our world. Now, the way this most often works out is how we rank different things in our constructs. For instance, if we have a construct referring to what is good, and within that we have what makes someone moral and intelligent, and if being good is moral and intelligent, which one of those two, morality or intelligence, is more important? And based on our experiences, based on what we see holding true in our reality and our world, will affect which one of those we consider more when we are evaluating whether or not someone is good. That's what organization is. The next corollary is dichotomy. And the idea here is that if we understand something some way, if we have a construct about what is good, we also have to have a construct. We also have to have an understanding of what the opposite of good is, right? So if we understand something is good, we also have to understand what it is for something to not be good. There has to be a mutual exclusivity there. There's always an alternative. That's what dichotomy is. The range corollary simply refers to any particular construct's span of applicability. How many different ways can I apply this construct? Fragmentation is the competition or the inconsistencies among constructs. So we can have multiple constructs that aren't all consistent, and they can all exist at the same time. The example in our text that's given is one of a friend. You could be playing a board game with your friend, and there you're hanging out, it's all good. And you could move to a completely different social circumstance. Maybe now you're competing for the attention of someone. Maybe you're competing for the attention of someone of the opposite sex, and now that person is an enemy. Now there's someone you're competing with. And those two different constructs, those two different ways of understanding those scenarios are actually in conflict with one another. But that's what fragmentation is describing, how those things can exist at the same time. Choice corollary is one of the most important contributions, I think, to the world of understanding humans and psychology that this theory helped with. Now, in line with the dichotomy corollary, we have to realize that there's always an alternative between choosing what is best for us, right? So, what we have here is essentially two choices every single time we're presented with a circumstance. And Kelly describes these two choices as secure versus adventurous. Now, secure choices refer to ones that we've seen before. If we choose to go the secure route, we have had similar experiences before. We understand what's going to happen. We probably can effectively predict what's going to come about if we choose this way. On the other side, we have the adventurous choice. Now, the great thing about the adventurous choice is that there is a potential for greater rewards. But that always comes at the cost of less predictive accuracy because we haven't had as many similar experiences. Now, as we choose between these two different ways or paths, we are choosing between defining our personal constructs and expanding them. Now, I was watching this show last night, Orange is the New Black, and this show is about women in this prison, and I really like it. Maybe you do too. And the episode that I saw last night had this character who ended up in prison because she murdered someone because she thought that that person had disrespected her. She ends up in prison, and the show goes on, and this circumstance comes about where that same character feels like she's disrespected again. She's presented with a decision. What will she choose? Will she choose what she's familiar with, or will she choose what she's not familiar with? And the funny thing here is that the adventurous choice is actually to not kill someone. In the show, she decides that she's going to kill this person. But she chooses that because she's familiar with that. She has predictive accuracy as to what will come about when she kills that person because she's done it before. She's chosen to define her personal construct, to reinforce the decision she's already made. Now, if she had chosen to go the other route, she would have expanded her personal construct because she would be exploring a new way of interacting with her world. One of the next corollaries is experience, and essentially what we're talking about here is as we progress in life, we're going to be constantly confronted with new experiences. And if our current constructs, if our personal constructs, our way of understanding the world does not validly predict the situations or their outcomes, then it needs to be reformed or replaced because those constructs aren't actually helping us understand the world any better. Modulation is a corollary that refers to the permeability of a construct. What we're talking about here is the amount that a person will allow a new element, a new experience to affect or adapt an existing construct. And when we talk about permeability, we have to talk about impermeable versus permeable. Now, an impermeable construct can be exemplified in a person who discriminates against a certain ethnic race because they believe that that race is less intelligent. The text talks about how this person, if they are impermeable in this construct, how it doesn't matter what they experience. It doesn't matter if they see people that are intelligent in this ethnic group because they have closed out the possibility of new experiences affecting the way that they interact with the world. That is an impermeable construct. Now, on the other side, a permeable construct is one that is always up in the air, one that is always open for new experiences changing it. Commonality is another corollary, and this refers to how people who construe experiences similarly, who understand them similarly, will have similar cognitive processes that will interact with the world similarly. Sociality refers to something that happens all the time that sounds kind of complicated, but it's really simple if you think about it. And sociality is the way that we construe other people's constructs, how we understand the way that other people understand the world. And we do this, we construe their constructs to predict their behavior and adapt to it. And other people do this to us as well. They do it to us all the time. This is how we make friends. This is how we make enemies. Now, a product of the process of evaluating people according to his theory was Kelly's uncovering of cognitive styles. Now, when we're talking about cognitive styles, what we're referring to is the difference in how we construe people, objects, and circumstances in our environment. And there are two different categories worth exploring here: cognitive complexity versus cognitive simplicity. Cognitive complexity refers to a person's ability to see difference in people. Now, this allows for a certain style of construing an environment. If you can see the differences that people have, then you will be able to see your world. You'll be able to perceive your world in a different way. On the other side, cognitive simplicity is the relative inability to see or ascertain differences among people. I think that someone with cognitive simplicity will probably see more generalizations referring to people. And this obviously will have an effect on the way this person is able to perceive their world. Now, Kelly's theory completely favors cognitive complexity because if the goal is to anticipate future events, to better understand our world through anticipating what will be coming in the future, it's obvious that we want to be able to see the differences and the nuances in people in order to have a more effective, a more accurate read on what will be coming. Some reflections on this theory about the assumptions and the influences show us that this theory really focuses on the intellectual at the expense of the emotional. There is an assumption in personal construct theory that all people are rational. Furthermore, that rationality is the way to understand people. Now, the sad thing about humanity is that we don't always operate from our rationality. That's not meant to be condescending or pejorative. It's just how it is. And this is probably greatly affected by the pool of clients that Kelly had. He had a lot of college students who were able to access their rational faculties and intelligently describe their circumstances. In the same line, this theory doesn't really deal with extreme human behavior, only with those who are in relative control of their cognitive faculties. Because of this, we're left with questions about this theory. For instance, how can two people construe differently? We understand basically that because of the individuality corollary, that people will inevitably see things differently. But how exactly does that work? What are the factors? Similarly, how do we choose between security and adventure? How does one opt to define or to expand their constructs? How does that work? How do humans value those one over the other? And is there a way to understand that? That's a question that we're left with. And does this theory's ultimate end, the ability to anticipate future events, accurately depict human nature? Does it accurately capture the heart behind what we genuinely are searching for as humans? Does it capture all that we are? Or does it simply capture a part of what we are? The final thoughts on this theory about what it contributes to the field of personality studies are that, this is an original theory. And because of that, there are a lot of things worth studying. And it's part of the reason why I spent so much time going over all of the various intricacies of the theories, because there's a lot that we can learn from this theory because it isn't typical. This theory, because of its originality, is highly valuable in offering a new perspective in personality theories. We are looking at a theory that is based completely outside of typical ways of measuring and understanding personality. And that's really, really valuable. That's really influential. This new perspective actually has assisted, I think, in helping us realize that humans aren't simply victims of their past or their childhood or whatever. They're not just passively living out a predetermined reality. Rather, that human volition is an essential part of what it means to exist, what it means to be a human. But finally, we have to realize that the absence of a lot of those widely accepted factors, such as ego and unconscious, make it really difficult to completely embrace this theory because it seems to have turned a blind eye to something that so many other psychologists have found deeply valuable. So there it is. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope that it was beneficial and that I was clear. Leave me a comment. Thanks, guys.